What is a major hidden secret in your industry that the general public doesn't know? If you buy no nitrates added deli meat, look for celery juice in the ingredients. Fields of celery are fertilized with high nitrogen fertilizer, watered heavily, quickly harvested and juiced. That juice is loaded with nitrates but considered a natural ingredient. Worked for a food ingredient company with massive celery farms in Wisconsin. Celery is high naturally in nitrates, which is why it's used. But unlike nitrates as a product, the celery is not standardized. So it's likely that one can intake more nitrates when celery salts are used than if it's made with nitrates. A couple of facts. Celery is a sponge and food industrialists are sociopaths. No joke. The number of meetings I was in assessing the risk of litigation was maddening. I did not last long there. Paramedic here. Most people don't realize we don't save a ton of lives. Most of the lives saved have been due to quick bystander action of early CPR AED application bleeding control. I tell people that EMS is really the second responder to an emergency, and bystanders are truly the first responders. Even on a perfect day, by the time the 911 call is received, dispatched, we travel to the scene, it'll likely be 6+ minutes, and your chances of survival in cardiac arrest or a severe bleeding situation diminishes tremendously. So learn CPR and basic first aid, folks. Most fire departments/EMS agencies offer them for free or very little cost, and it's your best chance at increasing a person's chance of survival. Yep, my brother was a paramedic. R kept saying his job was to make sure people stayed saved because he was answering a call the actual savior made. A few weeks ago, my old boss was just about to start a trial when the opposing counsel had a heart attack. Boss gave him CPR that he remembered from being a Boy Scout 30 years ago for like 8 minutes until the EMTs got there and the other attorney pulled through. The early CPR was absolutely credited for saving his life. I'm a rural medic, so we can be upwards of 15 mins to get to a call from dispatch time. I've called in so many flights because the nearest Trauma 1 is a couple hours away, at least by LNS. Otherwise, we're stuck with a level 3 at most, which is about a half hour away from most calls. Mark your packages fragile all you want. It will be treated no better or worse than anything else. Tip from having sold art for a while. If you have a document, photo, or artwork, grab a big sheet of foam core board and sandwich your document/picture between two pieces. It helps if you cut it so that it slides into the envelope very snugly. It makes it even harder to try and bend it. I've never had anyone receive their art creased. No more mail delivery person folding an envelope marked "Do not bend" right in half. It's very cheap. I got mine at a dollar store, and it's super light so it doesn't markedly add to the package weight. I used to ship posters and used "Do not top load" stickers on everything. Adding extra material in the box was a much more effective strategy. I get art shipped to me all the time. Not only do they do the foam core board, they triple layer the cardboard. Makes it very hard to even intentionally bend. It costs more to ship, but well worth it. The moral here is that packaging needs to defy common sense. As an example, if you want to ship something that's 10 inch by 10 inch by 10 inches, you put it in a box that's at least 20 inches by 20 by 20 inches with a lot of proper cushioning. If your box's dimensions aren't at least double the dimensions of its contents, you are not packing right. Weight is also important. Anything heavier than 10 pounds requires a double-walled box. Single wall will not survive. Anything heavier than 50 to 60 pounds should go on a pallet. Anything heavier than 70 to 80 pounds should be in a wooden crate, not a cardboard box. Could you teach this to some of the places Rock Auto drop ships from? They routinely will do stuff like ship a pair of brake rotors, big chunks of cast steel that weigh 20 to 40 pounds or more, with spark plugs, long, skinny porcelain insulator, in the same box with like 10 air pillows as dunnage. Cold Stone Creamery seemed to do something like this as well. Whatever pecan praline thing I used to order at our first Cold Stone was always made with lovely pecan halves chopped in, until one day they replaced those with pecan grit. We moved to a nearby town and got a new one there eventually. And I watched the same process play out at that one over the course of several months. Also, thanks for the tip. Our first Raising Cane's will be open here soon. I worked at Cold Stone, and we always got the same ingredients shipped to us. Didn't matter when it opened or how long the location was open for. What is actually happening is probably just that. As the bag of pecans gets used, the smaller pieces fall to the bottom of the bag, and at some point the majority of the bag is smaller pecan dust. It's just bad timing. If you go back when the new bag of pecans comes in, you'll get nice big pecans again. This is it, 100%. Same with the M&Ms, Reese's, and other candies. I suspect everyone else do it too. When Carl's Jr. first opened in my country, it was pretty great, but now it's just another McDonald's clone. My town's local Facebook information group constantly asks super obvious shit like, I need to print a mailing label, but I don't have a printer I can use. Anybody know a business that offers that? Public libraries have had public computers and printers for 30 years, at the very least. Does anybody have an SAT study book I can borrow because I don't want to buy one for my kid? It's a public library. Books are literally our bag. How do you find old copies of the newspaper? Do I go ask the newspaper office? And, always, have. I did not realize how few people know about public libraries in general before I worked at one. I grew up with my mom taking us to the library at least once a week, so I just assumed most people knew at least that you can find books and get on the internet to print things. Like I get not knowing we have all sorts of resources for community outreach and programs for all ages and shit, but books and computer usage being an unknown bit of knowledge was truly mind-boggling to discover. At my local library, you can also borrow board games, garden tools, and passes to local attractions. And tons of manga, TV series, movies, and video games. Some even have video game consoles. My mother banned comics in our house when I was a kid. She was a teacher and believed they were brain rot, so I never got to read them. When I got my first real job, I discovered the local library in our town had comics, graphic novels, and omnibuses. I caught up on 24 years of comics in a matter of months. Mine even has 3D printers, video and music editing computers, etc. I was shocked when I saw all that. And I don't live in some fancy city in California either. My local library also offers free tampons, pads, and pregnancy tests. They also have free tickets to things like the zoo, the art museum, the history museum, live shows, and local sports games. My favorite is in the summer. Just about every location works with a local charity and provides breakfast, lunch, and even dinner for any kids that want it. No questions asked. As well, librarians need higher education these days. The person at the counter, if it's an actual librarian, is probably a whole lot smarter than you think they are. An actual librarian has a master's in library science, but most of the staff at my library are just library assistants. They all have post-secondary education, but most just have unrelated bachelor's degrees. TBF, my local library does not put all their services on their website. Yes, obviously they have books, publications, legacy media, and internet access, but they don't tell you whether or not they rent out baking pans, telescopes, VCRs, or the other lesser-known services. Chemical plants' emissions and spills are self-regulated, reported to the state. You can imagine how this can lead to things being underreported. This is a massive problem in Texas that the state refuses to act on. The Pods company took a wrong turn and ended up on my driveway. Got stuck and shot hydraulic fluid all over my lawn, tore up a tree from hitting it with their lift, and just left. I had a camera that captured the truck, but not really the incident. When O called and told them, they reviewed the dash cam and said, the camera was turned off, so there's no proof. Do you have proof? Basically, they left it at that. So I called DSHEC. They told me that I'd have to report the spill. They would come investigate, and I'd be responsible for the fines and cleanup. Then I'd have to sue the Pods company. So I had to dig and clean up the mess myself because Pods deleted their dashcam footage. One of my BIL works in the State Department that find and cleans up chemical plumes. He's slightly autistic, and somehow that's made him a savant at finding things companies don't want found. If any company starts giving the state a hard time or isn't being agreeable, they send him in and he rakes them over the coals with his ability to find crap like this. I don't know much about it, but it's pretty much all he talks about it at family gatherings, like some people talk sports. When an NGO says not for profit, it also means not for loss. All we need to do is balance the books. We can continue getting ridiculous salaries and random things as long as we can explain how it's part of work. Not all nonprofits do this, but there are plenty of shady ones that do. Edit. Lots of folks have rightly pointed out that nonprofits and not-for-profits are different. This is true, but only insofar as their beneficiaries are concerned. Also, those definitions may change depending on the country you're in. In the West, not-for-profits usually serve a private group individual. In places like India, they are usually bucketed together into non-governmental organizations. My comment comes from my experience working in NGOs in India and the UK, though mostly India because it has a booming and unchecked industry of corporate social responsibility, where any company that meets a certain threshold, say over $600 of net profits, needs to spend 2% of their average net profit of the past 3 years on CSR. $600K is a small threshold. Companies can either donate to NGOs plus report on it, or set up their own CSR branch, reroute their economic profits here, convert them into spiritual currency, and increase the main company's share value or social value. All this while the nonprofit does what it thinks best, usually has members of the leadership on its board, drawing salaries, getting perks, etc. All that to say, like others have pointed out below, check their annual reports and decide where your money goes. Lastly, not all charities are bad, and some have genuinely hardworking individuals trying their best to make the world a better place. Sorry about the rant. The BBB is such a terrible example of this. I feel like I'm on a personal crusade to get people to stop thinking it's a government entity. Yeah, in this day and age, it's wild people think it's anything more than pay to play. My previous job would get contacted yearly to maintain their services. For anyone trying to vet a nonprofit, all nonprofits in the U.S. have to file a 990, which is publicly available and includes details about employee salaries and budget. Good nonprofits also publish annual reports with a further breakdown of their budget. Just like with for-profit businesses, there are good ones run by good people and bad ones run by bad people. At the end of the day, nonprofit is just a tax designation, so do your research, and don't let a few bad nonprofits discourage you from supporting causes you care about. All nonprofits in the U.S. have to file a 990, which is publicly available and includes details about employee salaries and budget. All nonprofits above a specific amount of revenue, I think $50K, must file a 990. The IRS has nonprofits below that amount of revenue have to file the postcard form of the 990, which basically attests that the nonprofit is below the target amount. I forget what the short form 990 is called, though. However, these nonprofits are generally so small that you can probably interact with every member. They're also not pulling in six-figure salaries. There's another layer. All it's needed is for the nonprofit to invest back any profit into the mission for it to qualify and keep the nonprofit status. So not-for-profit doesn't mean it never generates profit. One way to reinvest the profits is to pay people, usually upper management. There are lots of nonprofits out there where personnel takes over 50% of the money generated. Your donation is quite literally going straight to people's pockets. Again, usually upper management. My job, government, encourages us to donate to charities 8 weeks a year. They host major events, it's a thing. Anyway, the only charities they allow to receive donations via their campaign are ones vetted by the Dept of State to have less than 6% of their donations go to admin costs. So 94% have to go to the charity to be eligible. Surprising that some really big-name charities don't make the cut. Now I focus on those that do make the cut all year long. Would you happen to have a list of the charities that do make the cut? If you're looking for big charities, Charity Navigator is a nonprofit that rates other charities on finances/etc. It doesn't usually do smaller or local charities, so don't ding somewhere for not being listed. That being said, that's not always a bad thing. People deserve to be compensated for their work. Someone has to do the accounting and manage the grants. There's multi-billionaire NGOs out there, cough like OpenA, but most NGOs are run by people struggling to pay themselves a living wage, and eventually abandoning the work for a corporate job because there's only so much you can be both overworked and underpaid. I see a lot of people complaining about road construction closures that don't make sense. Not really a massive secret, but it all comes down to liability and standards. Say the state says we need 1,000 pime to merge an on-ramp into our closure, and we only have 915. Guess what? We're closing the ramp. It pisses tons of people off because 99.9% of the time there wouldn't be an issue. If someone wrecks, though, suddenly we're liable for allowing traffic to merge below the minimum distance required. That's why you'll often see lanes, ramps, roads closed, with seemingly no workers and no reason for it. As a driver, I appreciate you spilling those beans. That makes sense. Almost every bank is held together by an old lady named Janet, who knows how to fix everything, and an old man named Dale, who is the last COBOL programmer in 100 square miles. They are ordered around by 35-year-olds with MBAs, but when Janet or Dale say they won't do something, it just doesn't get done. They have both been about to retire for about 15 years. I'm turning into Dale, and I hate it. I'm one of the last few batches of COBOL devs turned out by a Midwestern university. The job offers keep getting more outlandish. I hate writing software. I want to teach or work with my hands, but the money is just too good. Hundreds of thousands, but you can't just learn COBOL and be good. You have to be familiar with the banking industry. I worked for many years in retail consumer goods sourcing. Not really a secret, but something people should know is to always clean things before using them. Even things that appear clean and come in a bag or box, like plastic cups or cutlery. That stuff is made in large factories and will have traces of lubricant from the forming process, dust, insect poop, and God knows what else on it as product sits in the open before being packaged. It's definitely not a clean environment. I used to work at a Megablocks toy factory doing assembly line. When I'd be filling up those zip bags of the big chunky block sets for toddlers, my fingers would turn black from the dirt on them. I'm sure people bought these and gave them direct to their kids who probably put it in their mouths. How many takeaway food containers get washed before chefs fill them straight out of their cartons? Answer is none. They're manufactured in filthy factories and handled many times before holding our meals. How often do people get sick from contaminated fast food cartons? I think people lose sight of the fact that cleanliness is to keep you from getting sick. If there's dirt or a bug leg or whatever in your food, and you notice, you feel gross, and that sucks. If you don't notice and you don't get sick, no harm was done.